This is CKnappenberger, and this is my Module 5 for AEP 800 in the summer of 2019. This module is titled Barriers to Web 2.0. The first thing we're going to be looking at is the articles and kind of how they relate to my experiences. Barriers using the tools in a 21st century school. A couple things that the author mentioned was a lack of certain things. It was time, training, technology support, and administrative support. Those were some of the lacking things. They talked about how teachers lacked the time in their day and in their year to be learning these new technologies in order to use them appropriately. So therefore that was a huge barrier, is that they didn't have the time. The other thing then went along with the training. There wasn't any time for training. And then also if there was training, either it couldn't be afforded or it was, kind of pushed aside to make room for other things. So that was two barriers. Another was the lack of technology support. This meant the actual physical people being there to support when a technology didn't work. This put up a barrier. Why would a teacher spend their time and their training on something when it broke down, there was no one there to assist them with it? The other thing then being is lack of administrative support. Now, the administrative support could have been lacking because of lack of funds, and so therefore the administration didn't want to support something they knew they couldn't finance, or they didn't want to support something where they were unsure if it was going to work properly and kind of going out and taking the risk of doing that. The other two things talked about is school culture, and it's the idea of that the culture needed to support these risks and trying new things and creativity. And if that culture didn't exist inside the school or the district, then there was another barrier to using these Web 2.0 tools. Finally, talking about the digital divide, the lack of access outside of the classroom. If we're providing the access to these wonderful tools inside of our classroom and hoping that our students will use them and cherish them, but they don't have any access to them once they leave the classroom, this is a big issue and a big barrier for kind of properly using and implementing Web 2.0 in 21st century schools. Looking at some of the advantages, they do gain these 21st century skills they need by using these Web 2.0 tools. And this learning, especially at a middle school level, which is where I work currently, is this authentic experience that these students are having that is engaging, and it's engaging because it's authentic, but it's also engaging because it's collaborative. And that's the fact that middle school students love to work with one another. They love to work with their friends and talk and kind of be social. And so Web 2.0 tools allow that to happen with students in a very authentic way. The next article looked at different barriers, 7 common barriers that obstruct the adoption of these tech tools in education. And looking at them, some I spoke in with the first article is having a lack of vision. We have all these tools at our fingertips, and it's wonderful and it's great, but if you don't have a vision for how they're going to be used, this is going to be a struggle. You can give everybody everything, tons of access, tons of stuff, but if we don't have a vision as to how it's going to help us be successful, they're never going to kind of work for us. Looking then at changing the teacher's role. Should we move towards the kids are using these tools, so therefore the teacher's role changes or is different now, and we go to project-based learning, or that the teacher is really just a facilitator and not, up there giving a lecture and that's how the students learn. For many teachers, this is a struggle. This is not the traditional style or how they learn to be teachers, so this can be a huge struggle. And again, that goes down to the one that's further down, is that thinking beyond the textbooks. This is difficult for students to kind of, for teachers and students to get out of this traditional role that they're used to and kind of use new, exciting technology. Also looking at how to kind of scale these promising innovations. And again, that goes to the idea of having that vision. How are we going to figure this all out? How is this all going to play out? How are we going to be able to do that? How are we going to be able to fund all of this? Another barrier then, talking about the idea of lacking of funds. If we don't have the funds to invest in this technology, then there's going to be a barrier up, and we're not going to be able to adopt the technology in the way that we want to. The last thing looking at is having a strong infrastructure in place. This has to do with not only the technology infrastructure, but also the human infrastructure. We adopted a BYOD policy in our building, which was wonderful, but we lacked a strong enough Wi-Fi to support all of the new devices that were trying to use it. Also, our tech department had to hire 2 new employees on top of who was already employed in the department. Because of all these pushes, we needed to hire new people, which means we needed the funding to hire those people in order to support the technology that we were trying to use. This could be a huge barrier. In our district, we were able to do this. But in a district that cannot afford new employees, 2 new positions, this could be a struggle. The next article talked about the digital divide, and it was talking about the internet access. This article is mostly speaking about Appalachia, which is the dark green piece on the map there. Excuse me. And you can see that in that kind of piece, they have limited access to internet, and by limited, we mean almost none. This is a part of our country that only recently received actual power and light and electricity. They're at a disadvantage in the fact that now they do not have access to what the rest of the world has access to. Now, we need to wire this stuff, because a lot of people are like, oh, it's Wi-Fi, just use Wi-Fi. Well, it needs to be wired somewhere, and that's kind of what needs to happen. Big companies don't want to incur this cost. It's not worth it for them. It's not profitable for them, because even if the wiring is put in place, they're not sure if they'll be able to the people will be able to afford the actual bill that comes every month to support the access to it. All politicians seem to agree that this access needs to happen, but there's nothing concrete being done. The FCC has gotten involved, in which they said that they wanted to kind of push a program out there and have companies invest and kind of be, enticed to go out to these lower income areas, but no one's actually doing anything about it just yet. And they're using slower dial-up internet or satellite internet that's really not conducive to learning. The E-rate program is out in a lot of parts of the parts of the country out there, but it's not being funded as well any longer. And also now the students, once they leave the classroom, they no longer have access to internet because it's not being provided. So that's difficult. Also, Lifeline is another program that again isn't being funded as well, and that's providing internet access to low socioeconomic areas. And again, that's not helping because it still hasn't put the actual physical infrastructure in to support to support broadband in these areas. Looking at open educational resources, and this is looking at having resources available on the internet that will cover entire subject areas or grade levels. So school districts wouldn't have to purchase textbooks or curriculum anymore from commercial places or commercial companies. And this is a great idea for allowing free resources and having all of these things available. The problem is that people are looking at, can these free materials match the quality that you would get in commercial content? Commercial content is edited, it's looked at, it's reviewed for what will be helpful, and kind of how can we do this with these open educational resources? OER Commons was launched in 2007 by a nonprofit, and it's kind of trying to put out there all these materials and these comprehensive things and math curriculums and language arts curriculums, but we need to kind of work together, and by we, I mean companies and the government and schools, to kind of work all together to get these, to put lessons and curriculum together that makes sense and that isn't causing more of an issue or kind of making more work for educators and is providing the information that they need easily. Then again, the YouTube video looking at information and communication technology barriers. What are the barriers that are stopping us from adopting certain technologies? The first thing they looked at was culture. If the culture in a school does not support taking risks or support kind of trying out new things, there's going to be a barrier in place where these technologies aren't going to be adopted, because why are you going to take the risk if you're the one that's going to have to answer for it, or that your job may be on the line, or your career, or you as an educator. The other thing that they looked at was the idea of time spent with students. If as a primary school teacher, teachers are more adept, I guess you could say, at using technologies because the time spent in learning it comes to fruition within the classroom because you spend more time with the same students every day. So if I choose as a primary school teacher to learn a new technology, I'll be able to see it come to fruition. I'll be able to watch my students gain those skill sets and use the technology and gain from it what I wanted them to gain from it. Secondary school teachers spend less time with a number of different students. So if a secondary school teacher in the building that I work is trying to learn a new technology and they only have 45 minutes a day to have the kids work on it, then that doesn't seem like time well spent, because I'll never be able to see my students come to a deep understanding of the technology and why I'm using it. So again, these are certain barriers for adopting certain technologies. Looking at the questions, do I feel that the digital divide can be resolved? I want to be optimistic and say yes, but in order for that to be a yes, I think that there are services that need to be offered. When we have broadband internet available in a school, we need to offer these services. So if it's at night, opening it up to the community, or before school, so that other people have access to this to understand the importance and to understand how it can be beneficial in order for them to kind of support or push for these lines being put in. There also needs to be commercial and government investment. Without this strong push from government officials and from commercial investments, we're never going to not have the haves and have-nots. That is always going to exist, and that divide is going to be pushed further. What skill sets do I think 21st century students need before graduation? Positive digital citizenship, number one always. Having the access doesn't mean that you know how to properly use it in a positive manner that is adding to this society and not diminishing it. So that's the first thing. The other thing is critical thinking and problem solving going together. If you're a critical thinker, then you can problem solve. So I think that needs to happen. And then finally, teamwork and communication. If you're a good communicator because you've learned how to positively use your digital access, then you're going to be a better team worker. What impact has the global economy had on my personal internet use? It's provided me the time for internet use. Being economically sound, I have time to go through the internet, to do my finances on the internet, to get an education on the internet from Forte State University, shopping on the internet, all of these different things. The economy being, or me being, positively influenced by the economy has allowed me to expand my personal use of the internet. What technology training do I still need in my current position? If there are any new initiatives, I need the training before the initiative is pushed on me. That's the first thing. Virtual reality right now is being used in our classroom with different goggles and glasses, and I need technology, I need support in that and training in that in order to use it the correct way. Is my school district equipped with 21st century technology? Yes. Starting in September of 2019, Stephen Jones Middle School will be a one-to-one building, which is phenomenal. The students will have access to Chromebooks at all times. A lot of our old smart boards are being replaced with smart TVs and other interactive whiteboards in order to benefit our students so that the technology is easily used and doesn't have to be serviced often. Google Suite, we use Google Classroom for all of our interactions with our students. So that is, a 21st century technology. They're interacting through Google Classroom. They're using all the different Google Suite kind of programs. We have a secure network that the school uses in order to kind of provide all of these materials to our students. So that is a 21st century technology. We have our makerspace, our 3D printers, our robots. Students are learning to program robots and use robots. So our school and our district has taken many steps and has received plenty of funding in order to kind of have those 21st century technologies. Some of the advantages of innovative practices, going back to those 21st century skills. Our students are learning to collaborate with one another, they're learning to communicate, they're learning to think critically and be creative all at the same time. Pushing these innovative practices teach students that it's important and that, we value them being the best humans they can be as our next generation of people. Some of the disadvantages: cyberbullying, reliance on access, and plagiarism. The reliance on access is hindering a lot of that critical thinking. Not saying that, some of the technology can't help with that, but I think that a lot of it, that reliance is, we've seen an influx of cyberbullying and also plagiarism in our building. So these are some of the disadvantages that I've seen. Going also with the disadvantages is, have I experienced problems with cyberbullying and inappropriate use? Yes. We've had students use GChat inappropriately. A couple of students were actually brought up on charges for almost like hate crimes because of things that they posted on the internet or things that they use on the school network. So I have seen problems with this. I'm not saying that they outweigh the positives. I think that we just need to, again, going back to teaching our kids to be positive digital citizens, and a lot of this will be done away with.